Hi Margaret, welcome to this little chat, which is basically the first in our series of Spotlight on Volunteers. And I've got a few questions to ask you. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Caroline Story, and I'm the volunteer coordinator. So can I ask you to just introduce yourself?
I'm Margaret Howie, and I'm one of the volunteers at the Sensory Centre.
Okay, brilliant. And so, Margaret, how long have you volunteered for the Sensory Centre?
Well, when you asked me about this, I had to go back and have a look at all the bits of paper, and it was actually May 2015 that I kind of began to help a bit.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Excellent. And was that just first tentative steps? What did you do at that time?
At that time, I did a wee bit of befriending, and I sort of popped in and out of one or two of the groups, sort of basically to serve tea and coffee and things when people were on holiday and that kind of thing for the first wee while.
Okay, great. So, yeah. Good. So, in terms of volunteering, what would you say has kind of motivated you to get involved in volunteering?
I think mainly I quite like being useful in a sort of practical way, and I think the Sensory Centre is good for that, because most of the groups there's somebody that needs a cup of tea mostly and cake and things, so there's always something practical to do when you're doing anything, or you know, if you're going to the theatre with a group, maybe a wee bit of sighted guiding depending on who's there. But I mean, the other reason that the Sensory Centre suits me is because it's basically within walking distance of the house, so you're not spending an hour and a half in the car to go somewhere to volunteer for an hour to do anything. But no, I think it's just sort of being practical and doing something useful.
Brilliant. So pretty much it's part of your community then, you know, if it's local to you.
Yes.
You know, and you've been able to get involved on that basis. That's great.
That's right.
So we've touched a wee bit on your roles and what you've done previously. So do you want to maybe go into that in a wee bit more detail? So you've had a few kind of different roles. What have they involved?
Yes, well, I've tried a few different things. One of the first things I did, simply because somebody was ill, was to do a wee bit of befriending. Which I quite enjoyed, but I found it quite difficult because the lady that I was speaking to, she was very nice, but she was about as chatty as I am, and on the whole it made it a wee bit difficult.
Okay.
And as I say, I sort of popped in and out of a few groups over the summer, basically just doing tea and coffee and that sort of thing for them. And then one day I wandered into the centre and Leslie asked me if I had a sewing machine because she'd heard rumours. And that was when I got involved in doing the 10th anniversary wall hanging. I went along to the group that were doing some of the squares for it, which was really interesting because they were all doing totally different things I would never have thought of doing. And then it was Brenda and I kind of got together and decided where all the patches or all the squares were going, and it was sewed it all together, which was quite good. I won't tell you how relieved I was when I held it up and it was actually a rectangle, mind you.
Excellent. Well, that's interesting because I didn't work at the centre at that time, but obviously that wall hanging very much, you know, has pride of place in the centre, and it really celebrates everything that the centre does.
That's right.
And from what you're saying there, you know, you had a skill, but then you know, that was kind of adapted, and you adapted it within the centre in terms of how that skill could be useful to us.
Yes. I mean, each group I think was asked to provide one or two panels for it, and they kind of decorated them any way they wanted and that sort of thing. So it was quite interesting to see what everybody's ideas were for all the different groups and things, which was good. And then from that, I got involved with the art group at the education centre, in as much as they were looking for somebody to go along and kind of help there. And I went along for a while till they got somebody else, because much as I like needlework and clean things, clay and paint really isn't my thing. So that went quite well as well. I think everybody that went thoroughly enjoyed that. And then the knit and natter started, which I've been involved in basically since it started, which is quite nice. But mostly it just involves chatting to folk and, you know, dishing out tea and coffee to people and maybe helping folk find the toilet and that sort of thing. But I mean, it's all fairly practical stuff.
Yeah. But your role was really evolved, didn't it? And I think that's the thing, you know, it's about finding a good fit, you know. So you said that you'd mentioned that you'd done befriending, and that wasn't really, you know, something that you were too keen on, but you know, you tried it, and but then you found something that did fit with those things that you talked about earlier, you know, something practical that, you know, made you feel useful. So that's great, you know, that we were able to kind of match what you were looking for to something that was helpful to us. So that's brilliant.
Thing about the centre, so there's so many different things going on that there's always something that you can try, and if it suits you, you can keep doing it, and if it doesn't, well, there's something else you can have a wee shot at and see what it was. It's like the book group, the Zoom book group that I'm now involved with. I was never involved when it was in the centre, and then they needed somebody to kind of give that a wee helping hand along, and Lawson and I have been kind of doing, well, mainly Lawson does it all, and I just sort of find out bits of information and read out synopses and things. But a book group, it's not something I'd ever have thought of joining, but it's actually great fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so new experiences and new things to get involved in that you might not have considered before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the nice thing is a lot of the one-off things, if you try it once, if you don't like it, you just don't do it again. Whereas if you enjoy it, then, you know, you can sort of find yourself a wee niche to sort of fit in with.
Absolutely. Brilliant. That's good. So in terms of highlights of your volunteering experience, what would you say you've enjoyed the most?
I think one of the things I do remember is the art group that I was talking about, where they did the sort of clay and paint bits and pieces. They had an exhibition at Falkirk Town Hall, which I really enjoyed going to see. I think because you knew the artists and you recognised all the names, you can go, oh, I remember them making that. It was really interesting. But I think one of the other highlights is one of the days the Knit and Natter group was in, but there was a kind of meeting, I'm not sure which one it was, in the corridor opposite. And we were having so much fun at the Knit and Natter that I was told afterwards they had to close the door on the meeting because they couldn't hear themselves talk.
Excellent.
That was really good. But I think it's just the fun that you have is the thing, you know, it's all good fun.
Yeah, I have been outside the door during the Knit and Natter group, and yes, I can certainly testify to that they are very, very cheery, noisy lot, and you can tell they're having a great time, having really good fun. Good. So since COVID, we've had to change how we do things, and you know, you mentioned a little bit. You mentioned the Zoom word. We've had to change how we deliver what we do. So what have you had to do differently? You know, if you think about your Knit and Natter group, you're doing that quite differently now.
Yes, we've had a couple. Well, we've done the group project with the rainbow in the cafe, which basically we handed out. Lindsay distributed wool to everybody, and everybody sort of sat and knitted strips, and then I got them back and sewed them together and dropped it off at the centre. So it's different, but it can still work. I think it's really just a case of finding ways around things. And one of the other projects that Lindsay's got in mind is sort of yarn bombing in the sensory garden. So I think basically that the good thing about that is people will be able to use up all their odd bits of wool and knit or crochet anything they like, drop it off at the centre or get it taken to the centre, and then we'll sort of find something to do with it. So if anybody's got any wool out there, feel free to knit, crochet, hand it in, it'll be great.
Excellent. Brilliant. And again, for me, you know, as somebody who works with the volunteers, that flexibility is fantastic, and that's what we, you know, that's our ideal volunteer, somebody that can be flexible and adapt and just give it a go, you know, to try new things. So that's been very much appreciated. Have you surprised yourself with how you've kind of managed to cope with these changes?
I think it's as you say, it's the sort of face-to-face Zoom meetings and things. It's not something I'd ever remotely experienced. I hadn't even done FaceTime before this started, and I've now done FaceTime with my cousin and Zoom meetings at the Sensory Centre and Zoom coffee mornings with ex-work colleagues and things. So I think once you brave it and try it once or twice, and if you make sure you try it a few times until you sort of iron out the glitches, on the whole, it works fairly well. And I think it's particularly the Sensory Centre meetings, everybody's fairly amenable to things going a bit wrong in the middle. And it, you know, it's fine, everybody's quite patient and it's not a problem.
Yeah, good. That's just as well. Brilliant. So if you were recommending volunteering for the Sensory Centre to somebody who'd never actually volunteered at all, what would you say?
I think basically try it and see. You know, you can start off with something that you know you would like or you think you'd be good at, and then you'll always find the opportunity, even if it's just holiday cover, for somebody to try other things and expand. I think it's the variety of experiences that you can get just by kind of pottering along and giving a hand here and there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, sort of taster sessions. We tried to promote those. Yeah. Okay, that's great. So, Margaret, I'm going to ask you a little bit about you. What's the best bit of advice you've ever been given in life?
Oh, well, it's one that I've never used, to be honest, but I did like the sound of it. When I first started teaching, one of my colleagues, as it were, said, now, anything you get in your pigeonhole, you take it out your pigeonhole and you put it in the bin. And if it's important, somebody will come and ask you about it. And I've always wished I'd been brave enough to try it.
Oh, I love that. Yes. And the modern equivalent of the pigeonhole is your email account. That's yeah, interesting philosophy.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not brave enough to try that either.
No, I've always wished that I had been.
And so, what was the last book you read or film you watched?
The last book I actually read was something called Life Sentence by Judith Cutler, which as usual has got a dead body in it, so that's fine.
Excellent, so a thriller. When you're not volunteering or helping others, what do you do to relax?
Mostly sort of needleworky things, tatting, bit of dressmaking, sewing, knitting, going for walks. I'd like to get out into Calendar Estate and that sort of thing. And as I say, we both like cooking and baking and that kind of, you know.
Yeah, busy then, and busy with your hands. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, good. So, and I'm going to ask you now, what's your favourite place that you've visited?
I think one of the last places we managed to visit before lockdown last March was Porbandar in India, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was, and because it was just called.
We're frozen a little bit.
Yeah.
The joys. I'm not sure if we'll be able to split that back together again, but do you want to just tell me what you liked about the place in India?
In India, it was just, I think it was what you expected India to be. You know, there was all the sort of markets and stalls and all that sort of thing. Okay. And so all the people dressed in their sort of their own outfits, even I mean their own country's outfits. It was really interesting. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. So it's lovely when you go somewhere and it lives up to the expectation or your kind of hope that of what it might be. Well, so this is our last question, which is there anywhere in the world that you would like to visit?
Well, to be honest, anywhere outside 5 miles from the house at the moment would be wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
I think the Fife Coast might be the first place we get brave enough to go to.
I know.
Goodness knows when.
Brilliant. I think that's very well said and very much sums up how we all feel at the moment, yes. To be able to go a wee bit further than 5 miles would be lovely. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that and for letting us have a wee peep into some of the things that you think and like and enjoy. And I really appreciate what you've said about volunteering because you know that's brilliant for us. So thanks again for that, Margaret.
Yes, thanks, Caroline.
Welcome to Forth Valley Sensory Centre, where we support people with sensory loss. The centre provides a wide range of groups and classes, helps people access digital technology, and how to save money on their fuel bills. If you have a sensory loss or know someone who does, then please get in touch.